Today, y'all, was reading the Bible, and I got an answer to a question I had since I was a kid. Never knew the answer, but today the Bible gave me the answer. Hello, I'm Mr. Brian who proclaim Ministries, and the answer I got today was for a question that I didn't think would be found in the Bible. But the actual question was this: why does my mom always keep repeating herself? Why does my mama keep saying the same thing over and over and over and over and over again? Why? I could never say that to her, but I thought it. And now I get the answer, because guess what? God does the same thing. If you read through the scriptures, the same message repeated over and over again, several different times, several different ways. Why? Because we just don't listen. As my grandparents used to always say, we had a hard head. And today, another message, or God repeated himself again to help me in the season I'm in. And I'm so grateful that God does that. He takes the time. And I was reminded today of a verse in Psalm 103 that says, he knows our frame. He knows we're but dust. That God has patience with us, that he takes time with us, because again, I say it over and over again, but if I was God, I wouldn't be a good God, because I don't think I have the patience that God has. But today, the idea that came up again was about despair, about just heartache and afflictions. And I don't know if I would say I'm dealing with affliction the way Paul did. Paul was shipwrecked. He was persecuted. Paul was left for dead. But in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, Paul's talking about affliction and dealing with hard times and how we need to comfort one another, how God comforts us. Then in verse 8, he gets very transparent about where he is and where he was in the season of his life. We do not want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters, about the trouble we experienced in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired of life itself. Verse 9, indeed, we had received the sentence of death, but this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead. Verse 10, he has delivered us from such a deadly peril, and he will deliver us again. On him we have set our hope that he will continue to deliver us. So Paul he's struggling. He said, look, we despaired of life itself. We thought we received the sentence of death. And many of us today can feel that way because of the struggles we face in our life today. Life can be tough. Life is hard. Life is not easy. And it's all kind of things that we deal with. Some of it is self-inflicted. Some of it is just our culture. And if you watch the news long enough, you go think your body parts go fall off. I mean, things are really bad, from economy to the virus to vaccine mandates to school shootings. I mean, you look at all this stuff, you would think, man, if I walk out the house, I'm gonna die. The truth is, that could happen. You could walk out the house and die. And so I can get that many of us feel the despair and feel anxiety and depression. And I personally think some of that anxiety and depression is because the way we look at life, our perspective, kind of like the glasses we wear. We look at the world through a different point of view sometimes, and it leads us to despair. Because if my hope, as Paul talked about in verse 10, if my hope is in this world, I have no hope at all. But my hope is in God. So number one, I want to talk about this idea of the purpose of some of this pain, or how we can make a purpose of some of this pain. And the pain and despair we feel, it should cause us to look to him. Paul said in verse 9, not that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God who raised the dead. So Paul came to the conclusion that they felt this despair. They felt it very tough and heavy, so they would rely not on themselves. I know we live in a culture where it's all about, self-reliance. And I want to say no to self-reliance. I need to rely on God. I need to rely on the God who raised the dead. So even if my physical body dies, I know I have a home with God in heaven, because he raised the dead. So not that we rely on ourselves, but rely on God. So I would say, when I was growing up, they say no to drugs. I would say no to self-reliance, because we need to rely on God, the one who raised the dead. And in verse 10, he says, he delivered us from such a deadly peril and will deliver us again. Now, when I heard that made me think of the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? The Hebrew boys who were faced with, they needed to obey the king or to be thrown in the fiery furnace. And they said, King, we don't need to answer you in this matter, because the God that we serve will deliver us. And if he doesn't deliver us from you, he will deliver us. We will not bow down to you, king, or to your statue, because we trust in God. And even if he doesn't deliver us from this, he's going to deliver us from you, because we will be with him. So they had this confidence, this faith that God had them covered. Paul said the same thing. He delivered us, and he will deliver us again. Now, that doesn't mean that we will never face issues or struggles in life, or even death. But ultimately, death does not have the final word for the believer, the follower of Christ. Death is not the final word. So although if you watch the news, you can be deathly afraid to go outside your house, but as a follower of Christ, death does not have the final word. This is what he says in verse 10. On him we set our hope that they will continue to deliver us. Our hope is not in this world. And I think Sometimes God allows us to despair because we're putting our hope in the wrong place. Because we put our trust and our hope in the wrong place, that leads to despair. And when we find that route doesn't bring fulfillment, happiness, satisfaction, hopefully we will repent and turn from that and turn to Him. This message keeps coming up in my life over and over again, and I think the reason is I need to make sure I'm trusting, I'm following, I'm focusing on God. That my hope is not in this world, the things the world can give me, but the God who saved me.